All right, Claire, I got 4 o'clock Eastern. Is it okay if I go ahead and get this party started?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I think most of you are in afternoon time, but if you're watching from somewhere else, I hope you're having a good day. If you're watching the recording, I hope everything's going well with you, because we're here to talk about legacy giving, specifically how to talk about legacy giving without being a little creepy or off-putting. Important topic, one of my favorite topics, and it's going to be a good presentation. So I'm glad you're all joining us. I'm Steven. I'm over here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's little discussion as always. And just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Just want to let you all know that we are recording this session, and we'll be sending out the recording as well as the slides later on this afternoon. Don't worry, you'll get those. So if you have to leave early, or maybe you want to share the content with a friend or a coworker or a boss or whatever, don't worry, we will get all that good stuff to you later on today. But most importantly, we love to hear from you throughout the hour. So use that chat box. There's a Q&A box. We're going to try to save a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. It might be a little tight because we've got a lot of good stuff to share with you. But ask questions anyway, because we might be able to get to your question offline as well. Introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't done all that already. And you can also send us a tweet. I'll keep an eye on Twitter. But bottom line is, we would love to hear from you over the next hour or so. And if this is your first Bloomerang webinar, welcome. We do these webinars every Thursday. We've been doing them for almost 10 years every Thursday. It's kind of hard to believe. We love doing them. It's one of my favorite things we do here at Bloomerang. But if you've never heard of Bloomerang, besides the webinars, we are also a provider of donor database software. That's what we are. Bloomerang is a donor database. And if you're interested in that, or just curious, maybe you're thinking of switching sometime soon, check us out. Visit our website. There's all kinds of free resources, videos there you can watch, and you can learn more about us. But don't do that right now. Wait at least an hour, because we have a great friend of the program once again joining us, my good friend Claire Axelrad. Claire, how's it going? You doing okay?
Good, good.
It's good to have you.
Be with you.
Yeah, this is awesome. You're a stalwart of the Bloomerang webinar series. It wouldn't be a season without you. I think this may be your I think we're in double-digit presentations from you now, Claire. It's pretty exciting. But if you all don't know Claire, check her out. She's our fundraising coach over at Bloomerang, and also does a lot of cool things through her own fundraising school. You'll hear about it from her hopefully at the end, Clarification School, and is just all over the place. Not to mention, in addition to being super active in her San Francisco nonprofit community, she also does a lot, including teaching a CFRE class. She was AFP's Outstanding Fundraising Professional of the Year, writes all the time for lots of different people, not just Bloomerang, although you can find some exclusive advice from her on our blog as well, which we'll link to if you're interested in learning that, which I think you want to be, because after this presentation, you're going to want to follow Claire if you aren't already. So Claire, I will pipe down here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and let's see if we can get your slides going here. If you don't mind sharing again. Here we go.
Here we go.
Looks like it's working.
Let's try to get this. There we go.
Nice. Cool.
Just turn me off.
All right, I'm going to turn our video off and take it away, my friend.
Okay, wait. I got a little thing you don't want to see. All right. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for showing up. I want you to pat yourself on the back, because just by virtue of being here, you're already demonstrating how smart you are, because the more you know, the better equipped you are to make a difference. So on to today's session. I've got a lot for you today, but if there's a lot of questions we don't get to, I will write up some FAQs and send them to you afterwards, so don't be shy. But first, what I want to do is just ask Stephen to launch a poll to gauge where you are right now with regard to feelings about promoting legacy giving in your nonprofit. So just choose the answer that best describes your feelings.
The answers are coming in now, Claire. Looks like I feel I don't know enough about legacy giving is kind of the leader right now. Second place, my nonprofit is comfortable talking about it. And I'm okay talking about it, but not comfortable, is neck and neck for second place.
Okay, so it's interesting. Not that many people are worried that it's creepy to talk about it during a pandemic, but more that they're just not comfortable talking about it. All right. So I do have a bunch of information about why it's not creepy during a pandemic, but I'll try to go light on that. So the poll is just sticking up here. Okay, there we go. All right. So this is what we're going to cover today. You know, a lot of times legacy givings don't ever get off the ground because people think talking about death is creepy, just period, anytime. But during the past year and a half, people have really been questioning the meaning of life and their own mortality in unprecedented ways and kind of wondering, well, what will my legacy be? And just possibly, they may wish part of their legacy to be supporting the causes that they cared about during their lifetime, which may be your cause. It's not going to happen, though, unless you begin the conversation. And if your intention is to be around for the long term, it's time to assure you don't sacrifice your future by failing to develop a robust legacy giving program. So we're going to cover all these bullets on the screen today. But first, I want to share a statistic with you. Nearly 70% of people make gifts to charity during their lifetimes, but only 6% leave a bequest. Why is that? It's really because no one asks them. That's the number one reason people don't give to charity, period. So I just want to say, by the way, that artists have left a huge legacy around San Francisco during this pandemic, and I've taken photos, and I really like the concept of using them in this presentation just to kind of prompt us to think about the values that people have, because that's really what legacy giving is all about. So to get people to seriously consider leaving a legacy, they have to be asked, they have to be shown it's a good idea. 66% of Americans don't have a will. And one service you can offer is just explaining why it's a good idea. We'll see some examples of that later. And the other thing is they have to see other people they respect doing it. So you got a little of my bio. I won't go into this a lot, but it was kind of like, why listen to me on this? And I've really been doing this a while in different settings. I've started and managed legacy giving programs at 4 different charities in the trenches. So I've been on that side for 30 years. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. And then for the past 10 years, I've been working with countless organizations as a consultant. So I know that this works, good times and bad times. And I just really want to share my experience with you because that's the way I leave my legacy. So let's begin with what motivated me to do today's session. So one fundraising guru that I generally admire a lot said at the beginning of the pandemic that this was the only type of fundraising they'd not recommend right now. And this person called it creepy. And I understand the impulse to avoid the subject. No one likes to face their mortality, but that's not really what legacy philanthropy is about. Not today and really not ever. It's really part of the circle of life. No one escapes death. And sometimes in this circle of life, you're receiving, and sometimes you're giving. So it's like you take a rock, you leave a rock. And what I was going to share a poem with you about the kind of extraordinary period of time that we're in. And I'd like to ask you to, if you would, I can't see that you're doing it, but close your eyes. And I'd like to read you a poem from Lynn Unger. It's called On the Other Side. Through the looking glass, down the rabbit hole, into the wardrobe and out, into the enchanted forest where animals talk and danger lurks, and nothing works quite the way it did before. You have fallen into a new story. It is possible that you are much bigger or smaller than you thought. It is possible to drown in the ocean of your own tears, it is possible that mysterious friends have armed you with magical weapons you don't yet understand, but which you will need to save your own life and the world. Everything here is foreign. Nothing quite makes sense. That's how it works. Do not confuse the beginning of the story with the end. So you can open your eyes. I love that poem because I like the idea that we are creating and writing this story, and we do have some agency here, and our donors are doing the same with us, and we can help them. And in that way, legacy giving is not at all about death and dying. It's about life and giving. My mother always said to me, Claire, you can't take it with you. And whether we live or die, we're all thinking about what life will be like on the planet as we move forward. And yes, we're in a pandemic and it's scary and it's uncomfortable, but let's face it, people are seldom comfortable confronting the notion of their own death. Yet the reason it's not creepy to talk about legacy giving is, again, this truth, no one's immune from death, and this general rule in fundraising that you really do want to tap into what donors are worried about, especially if you can help them kind of take some control and mitigate that worry. And the other general rule is what I call the assume rule, which you know about, which is you don't want to assume on their behalf that they don't want to maybe confront the ramifications of their mortality. You know, the assume makes an ass of you and me. So you don't do anyone any favors by assuming on their behalf. And so I would say that, you know, I don't know if you knew this, but online searches for how to create a will have skyrocketed during this pandemic. So should your legacy program be on hold now? Emphatically, no. And again, this idea that death is as natural as birth, it's inevitable sooner or later. We're all hoping for later, of course, but at times in life, it's more top of mind. And there's a reason, even in normal times, that people go to their advisor to review a will. It's hard to sort of talk to somebody about making a legacy gift and say, well, now you have to go visit your attorney. But people do go visit their attorneys, and they need to know that you accept legacy gifts. They need to have it kind of as just this little idea in their mind, and we'll talk about how to get that there. But people go because they're having a kid, or they're getting married, or they're ill, or they're deciding to go on a major trip or do something risky like, parachute dropping or something like that. So anyway, Dr. Adrian Sargent and Elaine Jay do a lot of research on donor retention and fundraising. They found that 88.7% of donors think it's totally appropriate for you to ask for legacy gifts. So if donors are okay with it, you should be too. And think about what happens when a donor actually does go visit their attorney and the subject of legacy giving maybe comes up. Well, then they maybe go online searching for charitable beneficiaries. They may not know that you're set up to accept and manage these gifts. And trust me, it takes very little savvy to promote and accept bequests. You can do it. So we'll talk about that more, but I just want to talk about the concept of planning for the future. So imagine if past generations had left a legacy endowment from which your organization could now be drawing upon. And maybe you're lucky. Maybe that did happen where you are. Either way, now it's your turn. And if you've been around for 10 years or more, you should be thinking long term. And we often think of legacy giving in terms of what donors do, but we should be thinking about what you as staff do. And when you promote and secure legacy commitments, you leave an inheritance for those who are going to come after you tomorrow. And really, I would say building a stream of legacies or an endowment from which you can draw income is not a luxury. In fact, I think putting off legacy giving is fiscally irresponsible. And if I were to ask you, if you could have both a savings account and a checking account, would you think it's responsible to only have a checking account and live from paycheck to paycheck? I think I know what you would answer. And it's interesting that sometimes talking to boards, they don't get it. They have their own savings, but they don't somehow understand the long-term need for a charity to build an endowment portfolio, or have a stream of income that they can rely on. They somehow feel it's morally wrong for nonprofits to have any savings. And that makes long-term sustainability and planning extraordinarily difficult. It's also really a shame when loyal donors pass away without ever having considered a gift to your organization that would have perpetuated their values and made them feel really good. It actually would have been a very positive thing for them as well as for you. So that's not creepy at all. So let's look at where you need to get started. And that's with your legacy program case for support. So people need to believe that you're going to last long enough to benefit from their legacy gift. That's why I said kind of 10 years or more is kind of a starting point. And they need to know that your vision extends to enacting your mission and your values into the future. They also need to trust you. They need to know how you spend and use contributions. So can they easily find your 990 on your website? Do you publish your annual audit results? We're talking about money management, so they need to know you're fiscally responsible. And then you also need to be able to articulate that without fundraising or without a steady income from which to draw upon, you could cease to exist. So I like to document a projected revenue gap between expenses and income over a 10-year period. And here's a simple little chart. And where all you do is you just look at the next 10 years and you project what your revenue is going to be, all things being equal, based on how your fundraising and how your sales, etc., have been going over the previous 10 years. Maybe you're seeing a 2 to 3 to 5% increase in revenue in different categories. So you project that out, and then you also project your expenses, and you put in a factor for inflation. And usually expenses are increasing at a rate that's higher than revenue, all things being equal. So now you've got a documented case for support. You can show the projected gap. Now we want to make sure that you've got other preconditions in place for showing that you really need to have some kind of endowment or stream of bequests. And so the other signs pointing to go ahead and start this program is that you've got loyal donors. And so if you've got loyal donors, you've got prospects. You have people who have some ability through their savings, through their home, through their business. Maybe they don't have kids at all. Maybe they do have kids, but they don't need all of their money. Even if they give a very small percentage of their estate, for most people, the legacy gift is going to be the largest gift they ever make. It will be a major gift because usually people don't tap into their assets when they think about making a gift to charity. So the return on investment also is really high, and that's a sign that you should do it. It's only 10 to 15 cents on the dollar, as opposed to about 20 cents for outright major gifts, 50 cents for a special event, and $1.20, 25 cents on the dollar to acquire a new donor. So it's a really good investment strategy, and it spills over to annual giving. Dr. Russell James, who's done a lot of work in this area, finds through research that estate donors increase their annual giving by 75%. And why is this? It's because they've essentially adopted you as a family member. They've got real skin in the game now, and they care about your survival. The other thing is that there are a lot of easy giving options available. They don't have to be complex trust gifts. So we're going to talk about this later so that you can feel comfortable talking about this. And then right now, we're in tough times. And research shows that in tough times, people give more. They think more about what they value and hence, their own values. So again, it's really irresponsible not to diversify your income streams. And, if we look at this pie chart from Giving USA, you can see like competition has really increased for philanthropic dollars, and we have less donors than we've had before, but the sizes of the gifts from those donors have been increasing, which is why giving overall has still not varied from about 2% of gross domestic product for as long as they've been measuring this since World War II. But basically, your long-term survival depends on strengthening your revenue streams. And, I would say to you, well, what are you doing about diversifying? And if you're like most nonprofits, you're really missing what's right in front of your eyes, which is legacy giving, which you can see is 9.6% of all giving. So imagine that you could expect a piece of your annual funding pie as bequest expectancies or as income from endowment. It's just there every year. No one has to actively work on securing it because it starts coming in because people just think about you in terms of leaving bequests. It's like creating a stream of passive income. So let's go back to what you do to shift from feeling creepy talking about mortality. And it helps to understand a bit about psychology and how psychology informs behavior. So there's a field of experimental psychology called terror management theory, and it focuses on how people react when you remind them of death. And there's a recent paper by Dr. Russell James and Michael Rosen, who's a real plan giving expert. It's called Legacy Fundraising, the Best or Worst of Times. And in it, they talk about terror management theory. And there are two ways that people respond to conversations about their own mortality. They either approach it or they avoid it. And in the approach, they acknowledge that they're going to die. They plan for it. They set up a will that's going to take care of their families, etc. And the avoidance, they just ignore it. They run from it. They kind of live in fear. They cede all control. It happens. It happens. Nothing I can do. And what you want to do is inspire the approach way of dealing with it. Because it's a key contributor to people's sense of well-being, a sense of meaning, a sense of agency. And if you can help your donor develop this sense of purpose and meaning and significance, they're likely going to feel grateful to you. And that gratitude might be expressed as a legacy gift. And I'm sure you've heard about the MRI experiments that show that when people even contemplate making a gift, they receive a dopamine rush. It lights up the pleasure centers of their brains. It gives them what is called a warm glow feeling. And this is something that legacy giving can offer. So it's like you shouldn't feel uncomfortable, because even in talking to it and getting people to contemplate doing it, you're making them feel good. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it's true. So I want to look more at this approach avoidance, and I put it into a little matrix form for you. And basically I did this like a classic marketing matrix. And up at the top are the approach people. These are the people who are able to face their mortality. And in the upper left corner, this is normal times. You talk to them, and they're people who would leave a bequest for a family or a friend. They might see the opportunity to have their values live on, especially if they're committed donors or volunteers that they identify with you. So this is very low risk and very high reward. Then if you move over to the second quadrant, this is where people have a heightened sense of death. It might be because of the pandemic, it might be because they're sick. And it's the illness is something they can't control, but they can control that their values live on. And so some people will actually be more receptive during these periods. So I think this is only risky if you do it insensitively, where you're just really focusing on death and different plan giving vehicles and stuff, as if you don't even care that they're going to die. It's just like, give us your money. But done well, where you are offering them an opportunity to sort of manage their terror and feel better, it can be a very high reward strategy. And then over in the lower left, we have the people who are generally avoidance people. And they're just going to exhibit more avoidance the more reminders of their personal death they receive, but it's still relatively low risk because I don't think they're going to stop giving to you annually. They're just not going to leave a bequest. And then over in the final fourth quadrant, these are the people who, during times where they're facing their mortality, they exhibit enhanced avoidance because they're scared, and maybe they know somebody who died, so they feel like, oh, I better hoard my resources because I might need them. So it's low reward, but still, they're probably going to not stop giving to you annually. So the risk isn't that high. And some of the people that you message during these times are going to end up adopting the enhanced approach stance and act. And when push comes to shove, most people do really wonder what their legacy is going to be. And as a philanthropy facilitator, you have an opportunity, I would say a responsibility, to help, especially when people are thinking about the subject in terms of sooner, not later. And so one of my favorite questions to ask donors all the time is, what legacy would you like to leave the world? Or what would you like to see in the autobiography of your life? Which is very different than approaching them and saying, where would you like your money to go after you die? And that question of what legacy you'd like to leave, it almost always prompts a really interesting, engaged conversation. It doesn't have to be focused on what are you going to leave to us, so much as what are the things you value the most? What are the things that you're really engaged with? And that's the conversation that you want to have. You're after all, you're not their financial planner. You're not their attorney. Donors, especially well-off ones, have their own financial guides. So just be their philanthropic guide. It's your privilege really to talk with donors about the things that bring them joy, not worry. And what could be more joyful than leaving a legacy that perpetuates their values? And so even if you don't have a dedicated staff person to focus on legacy giving, I think that there are some really easy to implement strategies that don't require a huge investment of staff time and resources. You do have to invest and commit to this. We'll talk more about this later. But one of the things that I hear people saying is, wait a second, which donors? We don't know any potential legacy donors. Legacy giving is not just for rich people. In fact, most of your legacy donors are not likely your current major donors. They're likely consistent, modest donors. They may be loyal volunteers who've never made a gift. And there are going to be a lot of people who are completely unknown to you, but they've followed your website, or they decided that this is a cause they care about, and they found you online. And their legacy gift will probably be the largest gift they've ever made. And just some real gifts that I received. when I was working in the trenches is a $10,000 gift from someone who named us the beneficiary of their life insurance policy after their spouse died and they didn't need it anymore. $250,000 from a career teacher who was a longtime volunteer, never a cash donor, had no idea they had this kind of money, and $1 million home from a home care client who, was receiving services, but had this home and had no heirs and really wanted to show that she was appreciative. And that's the thing, is that it all adds up. A $5,000 gift from someone here, $1 million gift there, it all adds up. And if you encourage broad participation for legacy giving, you may be surprised at who shows up and expresses interest. So you have to let folks know you're open for business. You don't, if you don't tell them, they're not going to think of you this way. And it's just like all advertising, really. They say people have to hear about it 7 times before they even notice it. So you just want it out there. You don't need to go to tax school to do this, but you do need to commit to assuring your donors' wishes are fulfilled. So there are some things that you need to set up to make sure that if you get a gift, you follow through on it. But it's pretty simple to do this. So let's take a quick look at what happens when somebody who made a legacy gift dies. So usually you'll be informed by an attorney that a donor provided for you in their estate plan. And they will then walk you through what you need to do. And it could mean that the donor left a bequest in a will or a trust. And if so, the attorney will talk to you about the probate process. They'll give you a ballpark idea of how much you'll get. If it's specific bequest, then that's really obvious. If it's a contingent on another event, like somebody else dying before you get it, they'll let you know. And it could be to the residue of their estate, which will be a percentage after other bequests are fulfilled and debts and expenses are dealt with. And they can give you a ballpark of what that will be as well. You want to make a note of this in your file, on your calendar, some kind of system that you have. And then when that time period comes along, you want to call the advisor back to check in if you haven't heard back. You want to make sure that, this just doesn't disappear. You also may want to call people proactively, and that's one of the reasons it's really good to have a legacy giving society. And we'll talk about that, but if people have told you, one of the reasons you can get them to tell you is to say you want to make sure that their wishes are fulfilled. So if you know that if you see an obit in the newspaper that one of your donors died, you can call up that attorney and say, this person let us know that they had left a bequest for us. It's also possible that the donor made you a beneficiary of a retirement plan or a life insurance policy. And sometimes these companies are not as active about notifying you that it happened, which is another really good reason to have donors join your legacy society. Maybe sign a letter of intent saying what they did. You don't need to have all the specifics. You don't need to have the paperwork. You just need enough that you can follow up. And make sure that their intentions are carried out. When you are promoting legacy giving, say on your website or in an email or a letter, you really want to adhere to the KISS philosophy and keep it simple. Don't make it complicated. And so you want to use terminology that everyone can understand. And I like to think of the word legacy in terms of both the verb and the noun. So legate really just means to convey one's values through creation of a future gift to charity. So that's what a legator does. And as a noun, legacy is just a foresighted action to strengthen a favorite cause. So legacy people understand even more than they understand bequest. So I like to talk about easy to create gifts, bequests, making people a charitable beneficiary of their checking account or their pension or their IRA, where they don't even have to visit an attorney. They can just sign something with the bank or financial institution that holds that retirement plan. They can do the same thing by making you the beneficiary of their insurance policy. And they can even gift you an insurance policy that they no longer need. And then try to avoid the technobabble of traditional plan giving, which is really intimidating for charities and donors alike. And I think that's why a lot of people, many of you said you didn't feel comfortable talking about it, or you didn't know enough. Deferred giving, plan giving, endowment giving, those are all terms that have little meaning outside the fundraising profession. And I think that's why a lot of charities that might otherwise promote legacy giving get a little scared away. And I'm going to say, don't. Just use language that your mother would understand, like will planning or leaving a legacy. And I want you to understand, most legacy gifts are bequests. They're not charitable remainder trusts or charitable gift annuities or charitable lead trusts or any of those things that you're like, I don't know enough to talk about that. You don't really need to know enough to talk about that. And when you think about it, all significant major gifts, whether they're outright or deferred after death, they're all planned. So plan giving is not just this mysterious thing. You are working with your donor all the time to plan how they would like to extend their values into the future, into the community, how they would like to help you. So here are 6 legacy giving strategies for any nonprofit. And I want you to think of you and your donors being in this together. I want you to make leaving you a legacy as easy and compelling as possible. And just like any other fundraising proposition, it should be an offer that the donor can't refuse. And the first thing to do is to create basic marketing collateral messaging. So what is this? Well, simple messages are best. Please remember us in your will. Do you want to support a cause that was important to you in life? Where there's a will, there's a way. You know, honor your mother or your father with a gift in your will. Legacy Society members plant trees for future generations. Perpetuate your values with a legacy gift. You see how that's very different than focusing on process and having a whole list of things. Legacy giving, charitable remainder trust, gift annuities, you know, people don't understand those things, so they're not going to click on them. So where do you put this messaging? You kind of sprinkle it anywhere you can think of. Again, this is these 7 impressions or more that you just want people to see it. You can put these little kinds of phrases on your outer envelopes, your email signatures, business cards, letterhead. I'm not going to read this whole list to you. You're going to get the slides, but just get creative. And then who do you target this at? Well, there's no single demographic. You never know. There are these life event times that people tend to make wills. When they get married, when a kid is born, when they retire, when they have surgery, during the pandemic, whenever they feel that they should get their affairs in order. And this happens at all different ages. So you don't want to just contact old people. And, you know, that's a sort of misconception that people have. Well, we're only going to send our legacy giving letter to people who we know are over the age of 65 or something like that. A study by Dr. Russell James found that people who have had a charity consistently in their estate plan for the long term, say 10 years or more, leave on average 4 times as much than those who first added charitable component within 2 years of death. So you want to get people in and committed and skin in the game early. Remember, that will also increase their annual gift to you. It's just that you can't ignore them. You have to continue to cultivate and steward them over time, just as you would any other donor. So let's look at a couple of messaging examples. So on the left is an ACLU mailer, which, is very simple. I can create a just future with a gift in my will to the ACLU. I'm passing along the values that I've lived to the next generation of civil rights champions. And you see, it's a message that's really easy to kind of understand just at a glance. On the right-hand side, we have something from Greenpeace Australia, which started out as a billboard and evolved into this beer mat, which is like a coaster. And it conjures empathy for the beneficiaries, for the whales. When you come back as a whale, you'll be bloody glad that you put Greenpeace in your will. It's clever, it's simple, and they can put it on an inexpensive item that's easy to mail. All right, let's look at another example. This one simply encourages people to have a will and puts the charity in the role of being helpful in that regard. So the one on the right is from the National Society of Prevention Cruelty to Children, and that's from the UK. And it addresses the question of, why do I need a will? And the helpful charity says, well, making a will is the only way you can be certain that your wishes will be carried out after you die. And this happened to be a newspaper ad with a form where they could send in and get a booklet called Caring for Their Future. And then on the left, this clever campaign by Dogs Trust in the UK, where the implicit message is, let us care for your dog. And so, they want you to kind of sign up. They'll send you this canine care card, and you're going to feel like, because you donate to them, they're going to take care of your dog after you die. But then it adds, would you like to care for others? So they give you this tangible reminder that your pet is safe and you're a caring person through this canine care card. So these examples that I've shared, I call the talk, and they create the preconditions for the walk. You still have to ask, but this talk builds a foundation that makes asking really not at all creepy, I don't think. So let's look at some more talk. So you want to frame the discussion in a really positive light by messaging donors about the impact they'd like to make in terms of either shared values, like, you care about feeding the hungry, leave a legacy that will continue to perpetuate your value to do that, or you care about welcoming the stranger or caring for the sick. So it's very values heavy. And the other way is to just use stories. Use bequests that you've received to talk about things that those bequests made possible in order to trigger happy memories that people have of, going to camp or going to school, reminding them of help that they received or that a loved one received. There's research that shows that receiving help increases the likelihood that a person will want to help others, even strangers. So, saying that you're looking for bequests to set up scholarships or set up hospice care or pet adoption reminds people of things that they cherish and that they tend to then want to preserve. And again, you want to sprinkle these messages throughout your collateral. In fact, wherever you tell stories about what donors' gifts accomplish, try to include a line or two where appropriate about how these outcomes were made possible by a legacy gift. You also want to profile legacy donors in your newsletters. Many people think bequests are reserved just for the wealthy, and you want to show it's not so. So you can give them examples of ordinary people who left bequests. And this is the principle, the Robert Cieldini principle of social proof. Please read the book Influence by Cieldini if you've never read it. It's filled with psychological principles that you can use. And you want to include stories of a range of donors of different you know, just very diverse group of people, different ages, etc. And donations of different sizes. So everyone can see themselves as a future legacy donor. And if it's a living donor that's done this for the future, those are probably the most relatable for people. So again, you know, you want to use these concrete examples. And again, these are, I think, the gifts that I already told you about, where you just say, here's the story of a widow who gave a $10,000 insurance policy in memory of her deceased husband. Somebody else thinks like, oh, my husband passed away, we've got a policy sitting in our drawer, I could do that too. So let's look again at what happens when someone goes online looking for a charitable beneficiary and they come to you. And so one of the places you want to put legacy giving is under ways to give or donate. And here, you know, you can see this drop down, and you know, they can highlight any of these things. I wouldn't necessarily do it this way. IRA gifts, charitable gift annuities, but the named endowment funds is a good one, because if you click on that, you're going to get a lot of stories. You want to use videos, you want to use photos, and you really want to talk about benefits to the donor for doing this. So even if you are promoting trust gifts, talk about what they're going to get. They're going to get income for life. They're going to avoid capital gains taxes. You can talk about those things, but I would go much heavier into the intangible benefits, as we've been kind of discussing all the way through, the perpetuating their personal values, the lasting social benefit, the giving back. And so like here is a bunch of stories. This happens to be the website for Jewish Family and Children Services. This is one of the programs I set up. They've kept it going. If you want to go to their website, you'll get some really good examples. And this is introduced very simply with invest in our community. And they're really stories about why people gave, that others might relate to, as well as the outcomes that they hope to achieve. So let's look at another example of promoting bequests through stories. So this is the Hospice of the East Bay, across the bay from where I live, and it goes the route of inspiring folks to add their own story, thus becoming a member of their legacy society. And again, the focus is on the benefits of doing this to the donor and to the community, as opposed to the plan giving features. So this is more about simple things that the donor can enjoy during their lifetime. You know, ensuring the mission for the future, but they're also going to get regular updates from you. They're going to get to go to this annual luncheon, and they even get a meeting with the CEO and the board chair. So why not let you know? You know, they get all these good things. And I often tell people that by letting us publish their story, they're doing a double good deed, because they're not only leaving the gift, they're sharing a story that inspires others to follow their lead. And people actually really like this, who otherwise had said, no, don't publish my story. And I said, well, you know, it does inspire other gifts. So again, that's the persuasion principle of social proof. Oh, so-and-so did this. I could probably do that too. And I've had people call me up and say, I see Joanne and Jesse did this. If they're doing this, I want to do this too. So having this legacy society, this club, etc., it's a really good tool. I mean, you don't have to have one, but human beings are joiners. They like being part of a club of like-minded people, even if it only means that you just recognize them as a member on your donor honor roll, or send them a certificate, or share a special newsletter with them. You don't have to have an event or anything like that. They just like knowing that this is part of their identity. Here's something on Alex's lemonade stand where they share sample language that donors can share with their attorney. And that's a really good idea. It also kind of prompts this notion of, oh, I could leave a specific amount, but I could also leave a residuary. I could also, leave a contingent gift. It gives them something to think about. Residuary, actually, just a little tip, is usually the best. That's what I encourage people to do, because most people die with more than they thought they would have. And then they don't have to stop and figure out how much they're going to give. But they can figure that out. And, a lot of times, I talk to people and say, well, how much would you feel like you could leave and your kids wouldn't even miss it? They wouldn't be upset with you at all. And a lot of people, a light bulb just really goes off in their head. You always want to, just a caveat, if you're putting legal language up on your website, you always want a disclaimer that you don't provide professional or legal financial advice, and the donors should consult with their own advisors. I just want to show you quickly this will planning tool. There are new services now. This is Giving Docs, which the ACLU is using to let people just come on here and click and leave their legacy in very simple steps. They do have a disclaimer there. When I first came upon this, I was a little concerned about it because I'd always been taught that you don't want to, help your donors write the will, but they are attorneys. They've vetted it like a lot, and they feel like they're not going to get in any trouble with conflict of interest. And so, you do what you want, and you can talk to them too. And I just wanted to throw out, because this is very user friendly. The other thing I recommend is sending an annual legacy giving appeal. Just, once a year at least, something that's specifically focused on wills or beneficiary designations, or both, either to your whole donor list, or if your list is too big, then to loyal donors, people who have been giving in the past 3 years consecutively, or people who give monthly. The most likely people to leave to leave a legacy are the people who've been giving to you the most recently. I mean, that's the case with any kind of fundraising. And then if you have people that you've identified through wealth screening or predictive modeling that have a high plan giving likelihood, you can send to those people. And this one is an appeal from Trinity Church in New Orleans, and I couldn't fit all of it on the screen, but they're talking about, how you don't have to be rich and why bequests are important. And then if you scroll down, they also had sample bequest language and a form donors could fill out if they were interested in learning more. And one thing that you might want to mail to is loyal volunteers. And so I want to consider developing an active volunteer program as another way to develop a pool of legacies. You really need to have folks, have opportunities for folks to engage with your mission by contributing their time and talents. And if you don't have a lot of this, it's a good time to take this off the back burner and think about more ways that people can be actively involved with your mission. It's a terrific way to grow future legacy gifts. And here I have a quote from an anonymous donor to the Penelope Burke Annual Donor Survey, who said that, they volunteer with a lot of different organizations. They give their time and talent, and those organizations have been designated in their will. And they're very comfortable with the way they've approached giving and volunteering. And just a little bonus tip, you want to make it really easy to reach you. So wherever you have your contact information, have everything, have your email, have your phone number, have your postal address, and have the name of a real person. People want to connect with a real person, not a generic director of development or director of planned giving. And finally, just want to emphasize the key reason you want to be promoting legacy giving is that anyone can leave a legacy, any age, any income level. I've heard legacy gifts called major gifts for ordinary people. And it really is a numbers game. So ask everybody, don't be stingy offering the opportunity for people to feel good and find some meaning. These benefits are the opposite of creepy. And, again, this not just going after older donors. I saw a recent study on Nonprofit Pro that just 7% of millennials had left bequests, but 17% cited the 2020 pandemic as the reason that they decided to create estate plans, and 11% of those people left gift to charity. So all those members to your legacy society add up. In fact, a recent survey of wills reported by the Chronicle of Philanthropy said you only need 12 to 13 bequest donors to reap $1 million. So you measure your success by the number of commitments, and then you just make sure to put in place a plan for people to let you know that they've done this, so you can steward them over time, because bequests are revocable. So just like any other gift, the biggest reason people don't do is they aren't persuaded they're necessary, they aren't asked. And the biggest reason they take a bequest out of their will is that the charity doesn't cultivate them. So asking plus cultivation is what makes it different. Donors who received a letter directly asking for a bequest, 17 times more likely to give than donors who were not asked. Donors who were asked and thanked gave twice as much as those who were not thanked. Donors who were cultivated, who got notes and letters and visits after the thank you, gave 3 to 4 times as much. And 70% of donors who made quote unquote planned gifts did so because they were asked. So here I have a little readiness checklist to end with for you. You can use this afterwards to kind of review and assess your organization's readiness. Just answer these simple questions. If we had another hour, I would ask you to break into groups to discuss each one, but you can do it with your team sometime in the next month or so. So you really get the benefit from everything that we've covered today, and, talk about, your mission and how legacy giving is going to strengthen your mission, what your case for support is, how you're going to get your leadership to endorse this, what prospects you have, how you're going to steward people and celebrate their giving, what opportunities you have to promote through communications, and how you can commit a modest but consistent effort to this. Bottom line, just let donors know what their legacy giving can accomplish, and show them how much you'd be honored to partner with them to make a lasting difference in your community or the world. So now we're to questions, although I don't know how much time we have, but Stephen, take it away.
Well, thanks, Claire. First and foremost, that was awesome. I'm getting a lot of good comments here in the chat, so thank you for that. A lot of good stuff in there. I love those ads. I love that Greenpeace ad. That's a really good one. Wish I had that coaster, but yeah, it's almost 5 o'clock Eastern, Claire. I will send you all the chats and the questions here, because there's some really good stuff, and there's attention. And some of you may know that Claire actually does a really neat Q&A. You are the expert on the Bloomerang blog, Claire, and you will answer questions publicly in a blog post. I'm going to shoot the link there, so maybe we can do a special feature with some of the questions today. What can people do to get started, Claire? What's maybe like the number one thing that they should do, maybe even before the end of today, to get going here?
I think the number one thing to do is put on your calendar when you're going to take that checklist and give some serious thought to all those questions. And, if you already have a program, then take a look at your communications and, are you focusing on something that really resonates with donors who might do this, as opposed to just a brochure with lots of vehicles. People can find that information readily anyplace else. They don't need it from you. That's like the last place you should get to. Yeah. And that tends to be where people start.
Yeah, so true. My takeaway from you is just start the conversation. What do you want that legacy to be? And then all that the legal mumbo jumbo comes later, right? Is that a pretty good way of thinking about it?
I mean, I could talk for this I could talk about this for another hour, like how you really get started step by step building this. But it's a little bit like building a culture of philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just develop this culture of course, people want to leave a legacy. Of course, they understand they've given to you every year during their lifetime. They don't want to stop. They don't want you to lose their gift,
Yeah.
but you have
Well,
to ask them.
I'm ready. I'm as the token millennial here in the group. I just updated our will because we had a young daughter not too long ago. I'm ready. Ask me. There's a couple organizations that I do it for, and maybe I should just do that. I know that's not very fair, but that really resonated with me a lot, Claire. But it's for everybody. It's not just for old people or rich people, right? That's kind of the way that we normally think about it. But
Yeah. And
yeah.
asking is important. You know, I mean, I talked a lot about putting it up on your website, sprinkling it everywhere, but you
Mm-hmm.
can't stop there. You know, I mean, I just had somebody anecdotally ask me for a major gift after a year of cultivating me.
Wow.
But they didn't, I mean, they didn't ask me for a major gift. They just kept cultivating me. And I finally said, you know,
Ready.
you're doing a great job of cultivation here, but I give you permission to ask me.
I know that's the hard part, right? The asking.
Yeah. But
Well,
most people won't do that. So
this is great, Claire. I think you've given people a lot of confidence as well as some concrete ways to get started. So thanks for doing this. This is awesome. You all should check out the Clarification School because you can learn a lot more from Claire. Read the Bloomerang blog. She's there every week, plus those question and answer columns that I put in the chat there. So thanks, Claire. This was awesome.
thanks. It was fun, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks all of you for hanging out. I think we had almost 400 people, so I really appreciate you all trusting us and taking time out of your busy day to be with us. Like I said before, we are going to send the slides and the recording later on today. Be on the lookout for those. And then we got a great webinar coming up next week. Our buddy Rachel Muir is going to talk about end of year. That's right, folks. It's already end of year fundraising time. I can't believe it. It still feels like it's 2020, let alone year end 2021. But it's never too early to start, right? So next Thursday, 2 Eastern, going to talk about year end giving. Be there. If you can't be there, register anyway, because I'll send you the recording. You don't have to be there live. That's okay. You'll get it first before anyone else. So hopefully we'll see you then. So we'll call it a day there. Like I said, look for an email from me with all those goodies, and hopefully we'll see you next week. So have a good rest of your Thursday. Have a safe weekend. Stay healthy out there. We need all of you doing all that good work, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye now.